All right. Ready to give your Spanish a boost?
Yeah.
We're going to do a deep dive today into superlatives.
Okay.
You know, those things you use when you want to say something is the most or the least, like the best or worst.
Right.
And to help us with this deep dive, we've got a video from Jaime Lara.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he's this amazing Spanish teacher on YouTube.
He's great.
And he has this way of making grammar fun and exciting.
Yeah, he's good at that.
Which is really good because superlatives, they can be kind of a dry topic.
Right.
But not with Jaime Lara. So he starts out by explaining that there are two main types of superlatives.
Okay.
Relative and absolute.
Right.
So relative superlatives, those are the ones where you're comparing things within a group.
Okay.
Like, the tallest player on the team or the most delicious dish on the menu. And then absolute superlatives, those are the ones where you take things to the extreme.
Right.
Like when you say something is incredibly beautiful or absolutely terrible. Yeah.
So Jaime doesn't just stop at the definitions. He actually gives us like a formula.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, for how to form these.
Okay.
So for relative superlatives, he gives us this example.
Okay.
Mi padre es el más alto de la familia, which means my father is the tallest in the family.
Okay.
And he says that the formula is pretty simple.
Right.
So you start with the definite article.
Okay.
Which is, el or la or los or las.
Yeah.
Depending on the gender and number of what you're describing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you add más if you mean more.
Right.
Or menos if you mean less.
Yep.
And then you put the adjective.
Uh-huh.
And then you finish it off with de for of.
Cool. Okay.
So like if I wanted to say my sister is the shortest in the family.
Okay.
I would say mi hermana es la más baja de la familia.
You got it.
Okay. Okay. So that's easier than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
One thing I find interesting, though, is that in Spanish, you don't actually change the adjective ending.
Like we do in English where we add like est or whatever. It's just the mas or the manos in front of it.
Yeah. It keeps it nice and easy.
Yeah, that's true. So Jaime gives a couple other examples just to really drive the point home.
Okay.
He says, Maria y Luisa son las más guapas de la clase, which means Maria and Luisa are the prettiest in the class.
Okay.
And then he says, Pedro y Juan son los menos tolerantes de mis amigos, which means Pedro and Juan are the least tolerant of my friends.
Right.
Okay, I'm starting to feel like I could actually use these in real life.
Awesome.
But now I'm curious about those absolute superlatives, the ones where you're really like taking things to the max.
Well, you're going to love this part because it gets fun.
Okay.
He goes over all these different ways to create those amplified expressions.
Okay.
And some of them are actually really simple.
Oh, good.
Like one way is you can just use muy, which is just like saying very in English.
Okay, so if I wanted to say this coffee is very strong, I could just say este café es muy fuerte.
Exactly.
Simple, right?
Yeah, that is pretty simple. But Jaime doesn't stop there.
Of course not.
He throws in some prefixes.
He does.
He even takes the time to explain what a prefix is.
Yeah.
Something that goes before the word.
Right.
Which I thought was kind of a nice touch.
Yeah, that's great.
And then he gives this whole list of prefixes that you can use to really amp up your adjectives.
Okay.
Extra, super hyper, ultra, mega, and even art.
Funny choices.
I know, right? Now I'm picturing myself like describing everything as like ultra fantastic or mega delicious.
Right.
But did he actually use those in the video? Like, can you give me an example of how he used them?
Yeah. So like one example is la talla de la camiseta es extra grande.
Okay.
Which means the size of the shirt is extra large.
Okay.
And then for all the comic book fans, he said, Batman y el Joker son archienemigos.
Ah, that's a good one. Which Batman and the Joker are arch enemies.
Nice. Okay, Archie and Amigos. That's perfect.
Yeah, it's a good one.
But wait a minute.
Uh-oh, there's more.
He doesn't just leave us with prefixes, does he?
No.
What else does he tell us about?
Well, then he gets into the isimo suffix.
No, the usimo suffix. I remember this.
Yeah.
It just sounds so dramatic.
It does.
So powerful. Tell me more about it.
Okay, so basically you attach it to an adjective.
And
it makes it like superlative.
Right.
But there's like a little twist. It has like regular forms, irregular forms.
Oh, of course.
So it could be a little tricky.
Yeah, I knew there had to be a catch.
Yeah.
So how do the regular and irregular forms work?
Okay, so the regular forms are pretty simple.
Okay.
You just add isimo to the end of the adjective.
Okay.
So like alto for tall becomes altissimo.
Okay.
For extremely tall.
Right.
And then like caro for expensive becomes carísimo for, like, super expensive.
Okay, I can handle that.
Yeah. But what about the irregular forms?
Okay. Yeah, those can be a little tougher.
Those always make me nervous.
I know. But they're not as bad as they seem.
Oh.
So Hyman gives a few really good examples.
Okay.
So like amable, which means kind. It becomes amabilissimo.
Okay.
For extremely kind.
Okay.
And then frio, for cold, changes to frigido.
Frigido, that sounds intense.
Yeah.
Like the word itself is cold.
Yeah, exactly.
But remembering all the irregular forms, that just seems really hard.
Right.
Does Jaime have any tips for how to remember those?
Yeah, so he says like flashcards can help.
Okay.
Or even coming up with like little memory tricks.
Oh, mnemonics?
Yeah. He even gives an example.
Okay.
For frio becoming frigido.
Okay.
He said, think of a refrigerator.
Oh, that makes sense.
Because it's cold.
Right, right.
So that's a pretty good one.
That is pretty clever.
Yeah.
I'll have to try that.
Yeah.
But hold on, just to make sure I'm getting this, the isimo thing.
Yeah.
So if I wanted to say, this book is extremely interesting,
Okay.
I could say, este libro es interesantísimo.
You got it. You're a natural.
All right. I'm getting it.
Awesome.
Okay, so what else does Jaime talk about?
Okay, so then he talks about another kind of superlative.
Really?
Yeah, he calls them superlatives without a degree.
Superlatives without a degree.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued.
Great.
What does that even mean?
So it's basically words that already express the ultimate. Like they don't need any extra oomph.
Okay.
So like words like principle for main.
Right.
Absoluto for absolute.
Okay.
Eterno for eternal. And infinito for infinite.
Okay, I see what he means.
Yeah.
Those words already have that like maximum intensity.
Yeah, exactly.
Built in. But I'm sure Jaime has some fun examples.
Of course he does.
Of how to use these, right?
So he talked about like a boss who's un absoluto inútil.
Oh, no.
Like an absolute idiot.
And then he also talked about a marathon that felt eterna.
Ooh.
Like eternal.
Oh, man, you can just feel the exhaustion.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, those are good examples.
Yeah.
I can see how those words like really pack a punch. But how would I actually use them in a conversation?
Well, imagine you're at a market in Spain.
Okay.
And you're trying to haggle for like a lower price on some pottery.
Okay.
You could say something like, este precio es absolutamente ridículo.
Wow. Okay.
Which means this price is absolutely ridiculous.
Okay. I like that. That's good.
Yeah, it gets your point across.
It's direct. It's emphatic.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see how like mastering all these different types of superlatives can really like elevate my Spanish and make me sound more natural.
Exactly. And that's kind of Jaime's main point.
Right.
It's not just about like checking off grammar boxes.
Right.
It's about being able to express yourself better.
Yeah.
Like giving you the tools to really like paint pictures with your words and connect with Spanish speakers on a deeper level.
I love that.
Yeah.
But I gotta admit, sometimes I get a little intimidated by grammar.
Yeah.
You know, all the rules and all the nuances.
Do
you think it's really possible to become fluent?
Yeah.
If you're always worried about making mistakes?
I think that's something a lot of people worry about.
Yeah.
And Jaime actually talks about that in his video.
Oh.
He says to try to look at mistakes as opportunities to learn.
Okay.
Because that's how we grow, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And I remember when I first started learning Spanish, I was so afraid to sound silly that I would barely speak.
Oh, yeah. I was the same way.
Yeah, it's natural. But Jaime emphasizes that even native Spanish speakers don't use perfect grammar all the time.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Okay.
They play with language.
Yeah.
They experiment. They figure out what sounds good.
Right.
And what sounds natural.
Okay.
So it's not about being perfect. Yeah. It's more about understanding the basics and then finding your own voice.
I like that.
Okay.
So it's not about rules. It's about like finding your voice within the language.
Exactly. And one of the best ways to do that is to immerse yourself in real Spanish content.
Okay.
Like watch movies, listen to music, read books, and just really pay attention to how native speakers use the language.
Okay, so it's about like observation. Yeah. Okay, I like that. I love watching Spanish movies, so I'll try to pay more attention to that.
Yeah.
What about speaking, though? Any tips for getting over that fear of making mistakes?
Yeah. So Jaime suggests finding someone to practice with, like a native speaker, even if it's just for a few minutes.
Okay.
And just remember, it's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah.
The more you practice, the more confident you'll get.
It's all about, like, pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone and embracing the imperfection.
Exactly. And then as you get more comfortable, you'll start to pick up on some of the cultural stuff, too.
Oh, the cultural context.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, it's important.
Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Okay, so for example, in a lot of Spanish-speaking cultures, being expressive is really valued.
Okay.
And they really like to use a lot of emotion. So you'll hear superlatives used.
Okay.
A lot.
Yeah.
Even for, like, everyday stuff.
Okay, so, like, if I'm telling my friend about a meal I had, I shouldn't hold back on the superlative.
No, go all out.
Okay.
Tell them it was the most delicious, the most flavorful, the most incredible dish ever.
Okay, they'll appreciate the enthusiasm.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, I like that. It's good to be aware of that cultural context.
Yeah, and another thing to keep in mind is humor.
Oh, okay.
Humor is a big part of Spanish-speaking cultures.
Yeah.
So you might hear superlatives used in a playful way.
Okay.
Or, like, ironically. Especially, like, when people are teasing each other.
Oh, okay. So, like, when Shaimi said his boss was un absurdo inútil, he wasn't being serious.
No, he was just joking.
Okay, so it's all about understanding the context and the tone.
Exactly.
Okay, but learning all these nuances, it can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
Any tips on how to stay motivated and not get discouraged?
Well, for me, I try to focus on my progress.
Okay.
Like, even the little things.
Okay.
Like, remember the beginning of this?
Yeah.
You weren't sure about relative superlatives. And now you're using them like a pro.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess it's easy to get caught up in what I don't know.
Yeah.
And forget about what I do know.
Exactly.
So I have come a long way.
You have.
Yeah.
And that brings us back to what Jaime was saying.
Okay.
About practice and immersion.
Right.
The more you use the language, the easier it gets. And he actually gives some good resources.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, in his video.
Okay.
If you want to learn more about superlatives.
Okay, what are they?
So he talks about the Spanish Royal Academy Dictionary, which is really good for definitions and examples.
Okay.
And he also recommends, like, grammar guides online.
Right.
And exercises.
Yeah.
For more targeted practice.
Those sound great. Yeah. I'll definitely check those out.
Yeah, they're really helpful.
Okay. But before we wrap up.
Okay.
What's, like, one key takeaway you want listeners to remember from this deep dive?
I think the most important thing is to have fun with it.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to play with the language.
Right.
Make mistakes. Experiment. And just enjoy the process.
I love that. It's not about perfection.
No.
It's about the journey.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as you keep exploring Spanish superlatives, just remember you're not just learning grammar.
Right.
You're discovering new ways to express yourself, to connect with people.
Right.
And to experience another culture.
That's beautifully said.
Oh, thank you.
So to recap, we've gone through the different types of Spanish superlatives.
We have?
We've looked at how to form them.
Yeah.
And we've even touched on some of the cultural aspects. We've got some helpful tips for mastering these superlatives.
Right.
And we found some great resources for further exploration.
Exactly.
And most importantly, we were reminded that language learning is an ongoing adventure.
It is.
Full of challenges.
Yeah.
And discoveries and rewards.
For sure.
Okay, so with that, I think that brings us to the end of our deep dive.
Awesome.
We hope you enjoyed exploring the world of Spanish superlatives with us.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Hasta la próxima.
Adios. For frío becoming frígido, he said to think of a refrigerator.
Oh, well, because it's cold.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that. But wait, hold on. Just to make sure I'm getting this.
Okay.
So with the isimo thing, if I wanted to say, this book is extremely interesting, I could say, este libro es interesantísimo.
You got it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're natural.
Okay, so what else does Jaime talk about?
So then he moves on to another category of superlative.
Oh, really? Another one?
Yeah.
Okay.
He calls them superlatives without a degree.
Superlatives without a degree. Yeah. What does that even mean?
So basically, these are words that already express the ultimate. Like, they don't need any extra emphasis.
Okay.
They're already at the top.
Gotcha.
So words like principle for main absoluto for absolute, eterno for eternal, and infinito for infinite.
Okay. I think I see what he means.
Yeah.
It's like those words already have like the maximum intensity built in.
Exactly. You don't need to add anything else.
Right. They're already there.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm sure Jaime has some examples.
Of course he does.
Of how these are used.
He does.
Right.
Yeah, so he mentions like a boss who's un absoluto inútil.
An absolute...
Inútil. Yeah.
Like an absolute idiot.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then he also talked about a marathon that felt eterna.
Oh.
Eternal.
Wow, you can just feel the...
You can, yeah.
The exhaustion.
Like it was never going to end.
Oh, man. Okay, those are good examples.
Yeah.
I can see how those words can really pack a punch. But how would I actually use...
Yeah.
Like, how would I actually use this in conversation?
So imagine you're at a market in Spain.
Okay.
And you're trying to like haggle with someone over the price of something.
Okay.
You could say, este precio es absolutamente ridículo.
Okay.
Which means this price is absolutely ridiculous.
I like that. It gets the point across.
Yeah, it does.
It's very direct. So I'm starting to see how like mastering all these different superlatives could really like elevate my Spanish.
Right.
Make me sound more natural.
Exactly. And that's kind of like Hemi's main message.
Okay.
With all of this.
What's that?
It's not just about checking off grammar boxes.
All right.
It's about like really being able to express yourself and like paint these pictures with your words.
I like that, yeah.
And connect with Spanish speakers on like a deeper level.
Oh, I love that.
Oh,
yeah. But I gotta admit, I do get intimidated sometimes by all the rules and nuances of grammar. Do you think it's really possible to be fluent?
Yeah.
If you're always worried about making mistakes?
I think that's a really common fear.
Yeah.
A lot of people have that.
Yeah.
And Jaime actually talks about that in his video.
Oh, he does?
He does. And he says we should try to look at mistakes as opportunities to learn. Because that's how we improve.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And he says, you know, even native Spanish speakers, they don't use perfect grammar all the time.
Oh, that's good to know.
Okay. Like they play with the language.
Yeah.
They experiment.
Right.
They find what sounds natural.
Oh, that makes sense.
And what's expressive.
Right.
So it's not about being perfect.
Yeah.
It's more about understanding how it works.
Right.
And then finding your own way to use it.
So not about the rules,
yeah,
but about finding your own voice within the language.
Exactly. And one of the best ways to do that is to immerse yourself in real Spanish.
Okay.
Like watch movies.
Okay.
Listen to music.
Right.
Read books.
Okay.
And pay attention to how native speakers actually use the language.
So it's about observation.
It is.
And listening.
Yeah.
Okay. I can do that.
Yeah. And then...
What about speaking, though?
Speaking, yeah.
Any tips for getting over that fear of making mistakes?
Yeah. I mean, Jaime's biggest tip is to find someone to practice with, like a native speaker, if you can.
Yeah.
Even if it's just for like a few minutes here and there. And just remember, like, it's okay to make mistakes.
Right.
Everyone makes mistakes.
Yeah, that's true.
And the more you practice, the more confident you'll get.
So it's about like pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone.
Exactly.
And just embracing the imperfection.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. And then, you know, as you get more and more comfortable, you start to pick up on the cultural nuances too.
Oh, the cultural context.
Yeah.
I hadn't really thought about that before.
Yeah, it's really important. Can you
elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. So for example,
in
a lot of Spanish-speaking cultures, expressiveness and emotion are very valued.
Okay.
Like they're really important.
Gotcha.
So you'll hear superlatives used a lot.
Okay.
Even in like casual conversation.
So if I'm telling my friend about like a really good meal I had, I shouldn't hold back on the superlatives.
No, go all out.
Okay.
Tell them it was the most delicious, the most flavorful, the most incredible dish you've ever had.
All right, I like that.
Yeah, they'll appreciate the enthusiasm.
It's good to be aware of that.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so it's all about that cultural context.
It is.
What else?
Another thing is humor.
Oh, okay.
Humor is a big part of Spanish-speaking cultures.
Right.
So you might hear superlatives being used in a playful way or ironically, especially when people are teasing each other.
Okay, so like when Jaime was talking about his boss.
Yeah.
And he said he was un absoluto inútil.
Right.
He wasn't actually being serious.
He was just joking.
Okay, it was a joke.
Yeah.
So it's all about understanding the context.
It is,
and the tone of the conversation.
Exactly.
Okay. But learning all these nuances, it can be kind of overwhelming sometimes.
It can be, yeah.
Do you have any tips for how to stay motivated
Yeah.
and not get discouraged?
One thing that I find really helpful is focusing on the progress I've made.
Okay.
Even the small wins. Like, remember how at the beginning of this, you weren't really sure about how to use relative superlatives.
That's true.
And now you're using them like it's nothing.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
I guess it's easy to get caught up.
It is.
In what I don't know.
Yeah.
And forget about what I do know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you've come a long way.
I have.
You have.
Okay.
And that brings us back to what Jaime was saying.
Okay.
About practice and immersion.
Right.
You know, the more you use the language, the better you'll get at it.
And he actually provides some resources.
He does.
Me.
Yeah, in his video.
Okay.
If you want to learn more about superlatives.
Okay, what are they?
He talks about the Spanish Royal Academy Dictionary.
Okay.
Which is a really good resource.
All right.
For like definitions and examples of how words are used. And he also recommends checking out like online grammar guides and exercises to get some more practice.
I like that. I'm definitely going to check those out.
They're really helpful.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay, but before we wrap up, I'm curious, what's like one key takeaway you would want our listeners to remember?
I think the most important thing is to just approach language learning with a sense of like playfulness and curiosity.
Right.
Don't be afraid to experiment.
Yeah.
Make mistakes. Have fun with it.
I love that. So it's not about perfection.
No.
It's about the journey.
Exactly.
Okay.
And as you keep exploring Spanish superlatives, just remember, you're not just learning grammar rules.
Right.
You're like unlocking new ways to express yourself.
Yeah.
To connect with people and experience a different culture.
That's beautifully said.
Thank you.
So to sum up,
we've
looked at all the different types of Spanish superlatives.
We have.
We've explored how to form them. We've even touched on some of the cultural nuances of how to use them.
Right.
Right.
We've learned some helpful tips.
We have.
For mastering them.
Yeah.
And we've discovered some great resources.
Yes.
For further exploration.
Absolutely.
And most importantly, we were reminded that language learning is an ongoing adventure.
It is.
Full of challenges and discoveries and rewards.
For sure.
And with that, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive.
That was fun.
I had a good time.
Me too.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We hope you enjoyed exploring the world of Spanish superlatives.
Yeah.
With us.
It's a fascinating topic.
It is, for sure.
Hasta la próxima.
Adios.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he also recommends checking out like online grammar guides. And exercises. To get some more practice.
Awesome. I'll definitely check those out.
They're really helpful.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay, but before we wrap up,
I'm
curious, what's like one key takeaway you would want our listeners to remember from this deep dive?
I think the most important thing is to have fun with it.
Okay.
You know, don't be afraid to play with the language.
Right.
Make mistakes. Experiment. And just enjoy the process.
I love that. It's not about perfection.
No.
It's about the journey.
Exactly.
Okay.
And as you keep exploring Spanish superlatives, just remember, you're not just learning grammar rules.
Right.
You're unlocking new ways to express yourself.
Yeah.
To connect with people and experience a different culture.
That's beautifully said.
Thank you.
So, to sum up, we've looked at all the different types of Spanish superlatives.
We have.
We've explored how to form them. And we've even touched on some of the cultural nuances of how to use them. We've learned some helpful tips for mastering them. And we've discovered some great resources for further exploration.
Absolutely.
And most importantly, I think we were reminded that language learning is an ongoing adventure.
It is.
Full of challenges and discoveries and rewards.
For sure.
So with that, I think that brings us to the end of our deep dive on Spanish superlatives.
It was fun.
I had a great time.
Me too.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you'll join us next time for another deep dive.
Hasta luego.
Adios.